Hi, my name is Jeff Starr, and this video is about the 5 best guitar amp heads for stage, studio, and home use. So, what was my criteria for putting together this list? Obviously, the first things first, it has to sound killer. And not just to me and my ears, but just to the broad consensus of guitar players. If this video is going to be useful for you, this still has to be pretty universally accepted. 2, these are all name brands. I didn't pick anything boutique. These are all things you could find in most big guitar stores. 3, all tube. 4, enough wattage to be giggable. This means you can do some, small coffee shop to a large rock club. 5, I wanted some sort of variable power feature so that I could still achieve killer bedroom tone in the middle of the night without disturbing family and neighbors. Number 6, I wanted some sort of line out feature so that the amp could be run direct into a recording interface for easy home recording or to run it directly into a PA. Number 7, I wanted to be able to run the amp without needing to have a cabinet attached. And this means having some sort of power soak to ensure that, the amp doesn't just blow up. And number 8, finally, I wanted all of this for less than $600. The last time I bought amps was in 2010 and 2012, and back then, a list of demands like this was pretty near impossible. And doing research for this video, I was thrilled to see all of the new amps on the market that answer this wish list of mine, some which have just been released in the last year or so. So now, in no particular order, here are 5 perfect amp heads for stage, studio, and home use. Number 1, the Hughes and Kettner Tubemeister 18. In putting this list together, I knew that I was going to include a Hughes and Kettner amp, and a lot of people may not know about this German company, so it seemed like a great place to start the video. H&K has been around since 1984, and some of their more notable players are Alex Lifeson, Nuno Bettencourt, and the late Alan Holdsworth. The Tubemeister 18 is a beautiful looking amp that packs in a ton of features. It was originally released in 2011 and it was designed for variety. It was one of the first amps to really target guitarists who needed a small head that could play a wide range of venues in studio work. They've led the pack in this. I personally wish that I had bought this amp way back in 2011. It would have saved me money in the long run and a lot of hassle. So let's review some of the features. First, just look at this thing. I love the glowing faceplate. I love the clear glass view inside. I love the little hidden handles. It's really smart. This all-tube amp is powered by a duo of EL84 power tubes and 12 AX7 preamp tubes. This amp features 2 channels with shared 3-band EQ, separate controls for gain and master volume for both the clean and lead or overdriven channel. As the name would suggest, this is an 18-watt head, but turn it around and on the back you'll find the ability to vary the wattage down to 5 watts and even 1 watt. This makes it perfect for gigs, jam sessions, recordings, and even quiet late night practice when running at 1 watt. In addition to be able to reduce the wattage, you can fully engage the power soak switch to disable the speaker, allowing you to run the amp without a speaker attached. If you try to run a tube amp without a speaker attached normally, it's a quick way to ruin your gear. So this power soak will, as the name implies, soak up all the energy that would normally be output to the speaker and let you run the amp silent. And if you're now thinking, well, that's great, but how can I hear my guitar if I don't have a speaker attached? Well, the Tubemeister 18 has a built-in red box DI. And if you don't know what a DI is, so I'll explain that. To record a guitar amp, obviously you would just normally put a microphone in front of your guitar speaker cabinet. And a lot of times this is fine. It may just be the preferred way to go. But if you're home, if it's 3 a.m., and that's the only time you have to record your next album, you might not be able to crank your guitar at full volume. The Redbox DI gives you an XLR output directly on your amp, allowing you the ability to run your amp into your recording interface. When you combine that with the ability to turn on the power soak and silence your speaker, you can now wail on your axe with your amp cranked going into your interface, but you don't have to wake up the whole house. You can also use the red box to plug directly into the PA. So let's say you're playing at a county fair and your 1x12 speaker cabinet's not going to cut it. You know, you could have a sound man mic up your cabinet, or you could just run the DI directly into the PA, have yourself a good peace of mind, and just know that your sound's going to go out sounding great. A tube safety control continually monitors your power tubes and optimizes them. This is a really easy feature where you trigger the tube check by inserting your guitar pick right into the back. I love the whole concept of that. Finally, the Tubemeister 18 contains an effects loop, allowing you to insert your favorite delays, reverbs, clean boosts after the preamp but before the power amp stage. If you want to know more about how best to use an effects loop, I'm not going to talk about it now because it's a huge topic. So maybe just Google that. Maybe I'll do another video if you want to know more about that. All right, finally, so how does this sound? Well, you're going to get clean to classic crunch and get overdriven to high gain sounds. It's a punchy amp. It has a lot of sustain. I really like the sound of this with single coils, and its current price is about $499 US. Number 2, the Fender Bassbreaker 15. So first off, just some history. The 50s era Fender Bassman is often called the holy grail of guitar amps. This Fender amp served as the basis for the original Marshall JTM 45, an amp that went on to become the sound of British blues and rock. The Marshall version of the Bassman circuit underwent minor but important changes, the most prominent being a change from the Bassman's 12AY7 tube to the 12AX7. In 1966, the album Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton was released. For this recording session, Clapton used an updated JTM 45, or what Marshall was then calling the 1962 model, and playing it at full volume. The historic sound of Clapton's Les Paul guitar on this Blues Breaker album essentially rebranded the amp as the Blues Breaker. This brings us to today and the Fender Bassbreaker 15, a name which probably makes a little bit more sense now. Bassman plus Blues Breaker, and we now have the Bassbreaker. And why not? Because, I mean, Marshall was really Fender's amp in just different packaging. So what do you get with this modern recreation of this historic amp? You get a lot. First off, if you want that vintage Marshall cranked Fender tweed tone, this is an amp for you. Blues and classic rock is right at your fingertips. And I think fingertips is a really great way to describe this. These are nice, touch-sensitive amps that react to your playing and guitar's controls. I personally love the feeling of an amp that's alive and sort of responding to what I'm doing. This is a 15-watt Class AB amp with an EL84 power section. And 15 watts, you get what I think is the perfect amount of power. 15 watts means you can crank this amp fully in a live situation to get the power amp tube screaming hot. But if you need to play quiet, you don't need to carefully balance your volume knob somewhere between 1 and 1.5. If you've ever tried to play a 50 or 100 watt amp in a small rehearsal room, you know what I mean. Like a tiny hair of a movement on a high wattage amp will you're like, oh, let me go between 1 and 2. No, it's so loud. As to be expected, this amp has beautiful Fender clean tone. If you love that Fender-y tone, you'll be very, very happy. In terms of general controls, this single channel amp has gain and master volume controls, 3-band EQ, an effects loop, and digital reverb. If you want to adjust the gain voicings of this amp, you will find a 3-way structure knob. This rotary switch gives you your additional cascaded gain stages. Low will give you those classic bluesy overdriven sounds, and if you turn this up all the way, you will find a modern gain that's way more robust than any of the vintage models it's based on. The Bassbreaker 15 contains XLR output with selectable speaker simulation, along with power soak to mute your amp for direct output into a recording interface or PA, similar to the Hughes and Kettner that we talked about. Some complaints about this amp? Well, the head version of this amp is currently selling for $599, and that's only $50 less than buying the full 1x12 combo. The combo contains all the same key features And you can still hook it up to an external cab if your gig really demands it. So the combo is a way better deal. In fact, it's a pretty amazing deal. Also, it's worth mentioning the Fender Super Champ X2. The Super Champ doesn't have the ability to do sound recording, but it does have a lot of other similar features. I actually own the combo version of the Super Champ, and I really do love the way the clean channel sounds on that amp. I call it a poor man's Princeton. I think the Super Champ takes pedals really well, and the digital voices and effects are really usable. I won't go into a ton of detail on that amp, but it may be something to think about if you are looking to spend about half the price of a bass breaker, and you need those Fender clean sounds. Number 3, the Boss Katana head. Now, I know I started this video by saying that my second criteria was that it was all tube, but I had to make an exception for the Boss Katana. This is a new style solid state head, and it's caught a lot of attention over the past year. Solid state and digital modeling amps are nothing new, and there are a ton of great choices out there, and perhaps that warrants a whole video of its own. If you want to see that, maybe leave a comment. But I decided to include the Katana head for a few reasons besides just sounding great. This amp was chosen for the weekend warrior, someone who needs to play various styles of electric guitar and also plug in an acoustic. If you're in a cover band, church band, or maybe metal is your passion, but your gigs are just playing acoustic guitar at wedding receptions, well, then, this might be the amp for you, and this will answer the call. Is this the best solid-state digital head? It's hard to say, as the space keeps changing pretty rapidly, and I expect someone to argue that a digital floor unit like the Line 6 Helix might be better. But if you want a low-cost, versatile, and traditionally styled amp head, then the Katana is a great choice. This amp is very simple to use, and as of this month, it is still very new. And because technology for these types of amps is changing and improving every year, this made the Katana head a bit fresher than the Fender Mustang 5, which has 1,000,000 controls, or even the straight-up solid-state Orange Crush Pro, which has no controls. In terms of features and functionality, the Katana provides the ability to select 5 unique amp characters, as they call it, plus a setting for acoustic electric guitars. The amp characters include clean, crunch, lead, brown, and this is derived from the high-end Boss Waza amp, and is their version of a 5150 Van Halen sound. And finally, like I mentioned before, the acoustic guitar setting. Add in 55 available effects, 15 of which you can store locally on the amp head, and you can have a total of 3 effects active at once, and the Katana becomes a very flexible option. The Katana also includes an effects loop if you have something special you want to plug in. And on-amp controls are basically what you would expect, making the process of dialing in your tone a pretty standard affair. For in-depth editing, though, you can actually connect this amp to your computer via USB and use the Boss Tone Studio software to customize the amps and effects further. Much like other amps in this series, the Katana contains an adjustable power control that allows you to lower the overall volume levels. One of the highlights for me is that this head actually has a hidden little tiny built-in speaker for practicing without having to actually connect it to a full-size speaker cabinet. I find this sort of adorable. It's kind of hilarious, but it's actually, I think, pretty practical. Maybe you want to keep this amp on your computer desk for just easy home recording via its USB output. And then every once in a while, you're just going to want to plug in your guitar and play some tunes. Well, presto, boom. You got a secret little mini amp, boop, right there, so you can doodle away while watching TV and chilling out. We've seen similar sort of ideas for tabletop amps with the shortly lived Fender Greta or the current Yamaha THR series, except this time you can actually take the same amp that you have on your tabletop and bring it to a gig and just blow the doors down. Finally, I figured I should also sort of say a quick thing about solid state amps, which is that they're really super easy to maintain. As someone who's actually watched a tube amp boom, 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 fall down a flight of stairs, Solid state gives you a lot of extra safety because tubes are fragile. Digital also offers the convenience of being able to include a bunch of effects, so you don't always need to bring along a pedal board. You can just use the onboard effects, and that's really handy sometimes. In terms of critical thoughts, some people will definitely have some trouble with the software to customize the amps and effects. But unlike other digital amps, you don't actually really need to use the software with the Katana. This is a pretty plug and play amp from the start. My only other complaint is that you are limited to only running 3 effects simultaneously. If you're looking to transition into owning an amp head, maybe you have a combo already, and so cost is a concern, the Boss Katana is a great entry into this world. Number 4 and 5, the PV Valve King 20 Mini Head and the PV Classic 20 Mini. That was a mouthful. My final 2 choices are PV amps that are variations on the same concept. I really, really like what PV is doing with these amp heads, so if this is a company that you've written off because of their dated 80s sort of hair metal looking logo, then let's keep an open mind. I'm going to start off by listing the similarities between both of these lunchbox-sized amp heads. Basically, these amps are siblings. One sounds modern and the other more classic, but they share a lot in common. So let me talk about what they share. These are 2-channel amps. They're powered by 2 EL84 and 3 12AX7 tubes, 20 watts of power, switchable down to 5 and 1 watt. Ability to run the amp with the speaker deactivated, which is great, because this amp has XLR output using PV's built-in microphone simulated direct interface, or MSDI. This is just their speaker emulation. You also get a USB 2 output that takes the MSDI signal and sends it directly to your computer for easy recording. So if you don't have an interface, you can go through USB. There's tube monitoring indicator lights, so you can see the health of your power tubes in real time. This is great if you plan to run the amp with the speaker deactivated a lot. There's also a headphone out jack with speaker emulation. And a headphone out jack is something you really just don't ever see on a tube amp. This is a pretty rare feature. It has 3-band EQ, digital reverb, an effects loop, a foot switchable boost/channel switching, and reverb. So as you can see, before I even break these down into their differences, these are super powerful and fully featured amps. And at a price of around $499, you really get a lot. Now the differences. The Valve King 20 is a flexible, modern style amp. Beyond clean tones, you can get rock, country, blues, and metal all out of this one head, but doing so is going to require some extra tweaking. A specific feature to this amp that allows you to accomplish this is the VariClass knob. This allows you to dial in your amp to set it as Class A, Class AB, or a blend in between the two. A Class A amp versus a Class AB amp. Well, what is this? So this is going to change how spongy your amp feels. It affects the overall dynamics and the clean headroom. These are important features that help to create the feel and sound of a vintage amp versus maybe more modern stylings. The Classic 20 is designed to strictly capture vintage tweed sounds, and as a result, it doesn't need the VariClass knob. Now I know what a lot of you are thinking, because I used to think this too. PV, sort of tweed classic amps, like, don't they just do heavy metal? No. If we go down memory lane, Hartley Peavy, the company founder, fell in love with guitars in 1957 while at a Bo Diddley concert in Mississippi. The first amps this company produced were excellent sounding, Fender-y styled amps. This is the original DNA of the company, and those in the know will attest to the tried and true sounds of PV amps such as the Delta Blues combo, the Classic 50, the Classic 30, and now of course the Classic 20 mini head. It wasn't until Eddie Van Halen partnered with PV to design his perfect amp, the 5150, that PV became known as the definitive high-gain metal amp. The classic 20 mini head will give you vibrant sound with an excellent touch-sensitive response, as one would expect. So choosing between the versatile Valve King and the historic Classic 20 is really up to you and what your needs are. So that is my researched bonanza festival of the 5 best amp heads for stage, studio, and home use. Did I miss something? Do you agree with my suggestions? Please leave a comment, let me know. And while you're at it, please feel free to subscribe. I make regular videos like this one, and I'm also vlogging about my process of learning the sitar. That's a really hard, really fun instrument. If you like my videos, please also visit me on Patreon, where you can support me in the creation of more content. And to everyone who has already chipped in on Patreon, you're super amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone else for watching. If you made it this far, you're a hero to me. Okay, thanks. Have a good night. Bye.